Whenever the Stanley Cup playoffs start every single year, I think the best way we can look at it is to say there's always a team or two that could surprise us. There's always a team that we think is going to do well and finally break some kind of slump. And there's always a team that we know is a danger of being a risk to be picked for the Stanley Cup playoff. How to put it is to say there's always a team that's a risk that everybody's going to pick them, but in reality it could backfire. You're listening to James Kushnerek here live on Spreaker Web Radio, here as another broadcast of Real Steel Sports is underway. Now, I think that the best example of that team would be the Pittsburgh Penguins. Let's just think about this team, for example, for the last 2 years, and just look at the roster that they have. If you just look at their team, and you just look at the players that they have, you've got Craig Adams, Sidney Crosby, Pascal Dupuis, Marc-Andre Fleury, UC Okinen, Chris Letang, Chris Kunitz, Evgeny Malkin, James Neal, Brooks Orpik. That more or less reads from top to bottom on that roster as an all-star roster. And you look at it, a lot of those guys have been there for a long time. Like you look at some of the veteran guys in the team. Brooks Orpik's been here since 2000. Marc-Andre Fleury's been here since 2003. Crosby, 2005. Malkin a year prior. Letang, Vitale, Pascal Dupuis, years. This team is just so cohesive as a veteran unit. And with all the guys, you'd figure that they'd have numerous Stanley Cup titles ever since Crosby arrived here. And that hasn't been the case. And in my opinion, the best way to sum up the Pittsburgh Penguins under Dan Bylsma, really actually ever since Crosby and the Penguins started making the playoffs on a consistent basis, pretty much the 06 to 07 season onward, Crosby's MVP year is at age 19, his rookie year. The Rangers series could best sum up what it's been like here. There are times where this team is the gas pedal down and can look unbeatable. There are times they've got an insurmountable lead, but there are times where they can blow it in the blink of an eye. And I have to say right now that if you were to look at all the aspects of what happened this playoff series and look at the previous few years in the playoffs, as much as head coaches are a scapegoat in the major four professional sports leagues, I do think it is Dan Bylsma's time to go. Ray Shero, I'm going to have to think about that for a little while. Then again, he did try as hard as he could to get some players deadline last year to help benefit this team, and he did. It's just the fact that the guys didn't really gel. Murray, Morrow, Iginla, those guys didn't really gel. They were hoping that the team would even become even greater than the sum of its parts, and the sum of its parts was already pretty incredible. But if you look at the Dan Bylsma era, and you just look at everything, you look at the Stanley Cup, you look at the playoff exits. Let's just look at that Stanley Cup here. I mean, you look at the 2008 to 2009 Pittsburgh Penguins. The road that they traveled. Started off the year they were just really, really average for the first half of the year. And then Bylsma comes in. He goes, I think, 18-3-1 ever since he gets acquired. And they go right from there. They beat the Flyers, beat the Capitals, pound the Hurricanes, and edge the Red Wings to win the first Stanley Cup since 1992, I believe. Yes. 91, 92, something like that, yeah. But ever since then, this team has been mired in disappointment. Let's just go through the playoff losses this team has had. You fast forward to the year after that, the Montreal Canadiens, the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference, really should not have even been in the playoffs. Was such a really average team. But Jaroslav Halak, and I think Gino Camilleri, I think that was his name, just took over that hockey team. Just took over that series. What I mean by that is when you here's the best way I can put this. Halak and Camilleri, if you were to take those two players out of the equation for that series against the Canadiens, after we'd beaten the Senators in round 1, that series literally would have been about a 4-game sweep for the Penguins. Those two kept it alive. Those two shut down the Pens playmakers pretty much by themselves. Then you fast forward to the next year against the Tampa Bay Lightning. No Crosby, no Malkin, losing in 7 games at Tampa. Honestly, that's not really anybody's fault. Yes, Fleury gave up a lot more goals than he should. I think there were 2 games where he gave up 8 goals. That's unacceptable. But if you really were to look at that series, a lot of guys that did not play very well. We couldn't score in the power play. But then again, Tampa Bay wasn't a slouch. They pounded the Washington Capitals, who were the top seed in the East, and had a 2 or 3 year period where they were probably the best team in the regular season in the Eastern Conference. Pounded the Caps and gave the Bruins, the eventual champion, everything that they could handle for 7 games. So the Tampa Bay loss without Crosby Malkin actually isn't that unexcusable. You can kind of let that slide. Heck, he went to the playoffs and was a pretty decent end of the finishing of the season. Fleury should have been a nominee for the Vezina, and Bylsma deserved the Jack Adams Award. Then you fast forward the next year against the Flyers. This is the series whenever I think of the Penguins under Bylsma, I really, really get pissed, because we were predicted by so many of the pundits to win the Stanley Cup, and we got blown out by the Flyers. You look at the 2 games that we had at home to start it off. We had 3-0 leads in both of those games. Those 2 games should have been wins. We won the 4th game in Philly. We should have won that series in 5 games. I'll tell you why. The Penguins, in deep down inside, were all scared shitless of the Flyers, and that series proved it. That series proved beyond a shadow of doubt. This team was scared shitless of the Philadelphia Flyers, and they knew it. Again, just goes to show you, no motivation, no inner belief, no nothing, no desire, no nothing. This team literally was a goal-scoring machine that had no defense on the back end. That team had no defense on the back end. And then you fast forward to the next year when we got the Eastern Conference Finals. Again, an Islanders team should have beaten them more easily. Senators team, we pounded them. Good. And then you look at it against the Boston Bruins, a team that was battle-tested with 2 tough series prior to this one, a team that was much better on the defensive front, and a team that could score more goals than he was given credit for. They blew us out 4-0. And then this series. Yes, we beat Columbus in 6. We should have beaten them in 4. Honestly, we should have. This team was nowhere near the same talent level as us. And then you look at this series against the New York Rangers, where we blew the 3-1 series lead, and we lose at home. Final 2 of the final 3 games are at home. Losses should have. It's just ugly. What that tells me is this. The Pittsburgh Penguins have become hockey's equivalent to the Dallas Cowboys. They have. A team that many of the pundits, when they were in the playoffs, that few-year period, with Romo quarterback, there were pundits are predicting them to win this whole damn thing. Or to be at least in the Super Bowl. And they kept falling flat in their face. And this Penguins team is becoming a really vivid reminder of that. Here's the best way to put it. Hold on. This team underachieves in the big moments. Because if you watch the games where we lose in the playoffs, where are Crosby and Malkin? They're not scoring. You know why? Because for some stupid reason, when we get into playoffs, Bylsma likes to use arguably the 2 best hockey players on the face of the earth as decoys so other guys can sneak up on others and score. I've watched enough Penguins playoff games to know this is what they're doing. That doesn't work. because these guys aren't consistent enough game in and game out to score goals. Now, what they should be doing is putting Crosby and Malkin in the best positions to win. And if you do that, you will win a hell of a lot more games. Like last year in the playoffs. Why was Iginla on the second line with Malkin? You take James Neal, who was on the one side, and move him to the other. That made no sense to me. Iginla was brought in specifically to play with Crosby. And he was on the second line with Malkin the whole series against the Bruins. I'm not saying that would have made a difference and it would have resulted in a win. All I'm saying is we'd have definitely taken at least one game if Iginla was on the top line, playing with the guy he should have been playing with. And that falls on the coaching. That really does. Because if you're using your best players as decoys, and you're bringing guys over to play with certain guys, and you're not playing with those guys, it just makes you look stupid. Really. It just makes you look stupid. And Bylsma's had some moments where he's been an absolutely brilliant head coach. But when it counts more or less, the decisions he makes with how to play his players in the playoffs has routinely gotten us in holes. The series if you look at what we've done in the playoffs since the 2009 Stanley Cup run, 2010 second round, 2011 and 12 first round, 2013 conference finals, 2014 second round. That is 4-5 in playoff series. That's unacceptable. On a team with Crosby, Malkin, for a while Jordan Staal, along with Chris Kunitz, Chris Letang, Craig Adams, Marc-Andre Fleury, James Neal, and other guys like UC Okinen and Brandon Sutter and Brooks Orpik. And if I mentioned already, Craig Adams, but here's the thing I'm trying to point out. When you have a roster like that, and you're not winning in the big moments, and your players are not being played the way there should be, that falls on the coaching. Now, do I think Bylsma deserves all the blame? Hell no, because there are players that, that are missing open nets. There are players that are just not playing good defense. There are a lot of players in this hockey team that do need to go, honestly, that do need to go. My advice to this team going forward is to evaluate every person on the roster. I don't care who it is, down from the fourth line center all the way up to Crosby. Analyze everybody. My opinion, though, is if I was in charge of the Pens, I would probably axe Bylsma, simply due to the fact that, again, underachieving in the playoffs with the roster you have. And what I think you need to do is you need to bring in a coach who can mentally give these players a nice little swift kick in the ass. Because the way that I'm seeing it, this team needs it. This team needs a kick in the ass. Because you look at the series that they've lost and the way that they've lost them. You look at the Canadian series. No fire. No emotion at all from this team. They played pretty much just stoic, emotionless hockey. The series against the Lightning, again, I'm giving them a pass on that because of no Crosby, no Malkin. The fact that that team made it to the conference finals, gave the eventual champion all they could, and their goalie caught fire. I'll give them a little bit of a pass on that. The Flyer series, again, they were shell-shocked. They were not themselves that whole series. They literally, mentally, were still on the bus for that series. The series against Boston, you look at that series. I don't even know where to begin on that because that's actually almost as bad. To score, 4 goals in 3 games, the best offense in hockey. Crosby had one of his great years. Malkin was having a pretty good year. Neal was starting to catch his A game, and guys like Kunitz are scoring goals like crazy. You can't put more than 4 goals up in 3 games. And it's not that Boston's defense is that good. I just watched Montreal tonight put up 3 on them. That's Montreal we're talking about. They put up 3 in 1 game. Pens put up 4 in 4 games. Something is just clearly amiss here. 3 in 4 games, I think it was, actually. I'm not really sure. Either way, the total was just ridiculously low. And now this year, the Rangers. Again, it wasn't that we didn't have any emotion. It wasn't that we didn't play, soulless hockey. The big difference was this year is that the Rangers wanted it more. They had more motion for them.